Hello there and welcome. I am Lawrie Brewster from the British Horror Studio, and I am honoured and privileged to be joined today by Jeff Barker. Jeff's background spans journalism, psychiatry, creative writing, and film, giving you a fascinating perspective on story and human nature. And in this conversation, we'll be talking about the craft of screenwriting. And for the first question, which I have a wonderful list beside me, what first drew you towards screenwriting as a form rather than prose, journalism, or any other writing?
Uh-huh. Well, it's really cool to be here, and that's a good question because the truth is, I've been writing for 25 years, before I was writing screenplays, I was writing prose, writing short stories, writing novel manuscripts. I have lots of short stories that are published in journals and anthologies, and I just always identified as a writer, no matter what my career was. To me, that's who I was. My job was my job, and I cared about my job, but I was a writer first and was never going to let that go. I think I first became interested in screenwriting probably after I saw The Sixth Sense in the late '90s, and I went and sought out that screenplay and read it, and was sort of blown away by how those words on the page could actually paint a picture on the screen. But at the same time, at that time, and then after that, you couldn't really be a screenwriter unless you lived in LA. And I didn't live in LA, and I had young kids, and so that was never even an option. So I let that go, continue with my prose writing, and then it was actually Curry that brought me to screenwriting when he first started writing Obsession, and he knew that I was the writer in the family. He wanted my input. He wrote it. It's not like I helped him write it, but he just wanted notes from me, wanted to know what I thought about the story. And so I thought to help him, the best thing to do would be to really dive into screenwriting. And I get obsessed about things when I'm interested in them. So I started reading 4 or 5 screenplays a week and really like get anything I could get my hands on. And it really turned my life in a whole different direction that I didn't expect, because what I saw in the screenwriting was that this is the type of writing I like to do, this cinematic writing with limited interiority that is show and not tell. And so it really fit my skill set. It fit my voice as a writer, which I developed over all those years. So it was really just a matter of learning the mechanics and the style of actually writing a screenplay. And so I helped Curry some, and then I started writing my own screenplays just to kind of see how that would go, and put them in contest and did well. Put them on the blacklist, did well there too, and then opportunities started coming my way. So it's been finding screenwriting at this age, professionally, is just such a gift. I'm so thankful for it.
I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing for you to discover and realize your potential in a vocation through the youthful aspirations of your son. And yet, as well, the cinematic language and appreciation for cinema your son Curry will have developed is something that you will have imparted as his father as well, a love of arts and cinema. And as I understand, your family is a very artistic family.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Curry and I, during his youth, we went to the movies theater, just the two of us, every Wednesday. That was our way to connect. I tried to connect individually with each child, besides just what we did as a group, as a family. And I knew that movies were important to him, and not just to watch them and enjoy them, but to study them and learn the craft. And he's been doing that his whole life. So every Wednesday we go to the movie theater, and we'd see movies that we didn't even really want to see because we'd already seen everything. And those sometimes were the best ones to study, because we weren't just lost in the story. We were able to really step back and see, like, how the cake is baked the best we could anyway, by looking at the screen. And then we would go sit down and have dinner and talk about it. And over the course of time, our conversations got more complex. We started doing our own research and bringing more things to the conversation. And we recently talked about all this, and we're both grateful for the experience, and felt like it kind of put ourselves through film school, so to speak. We joke about that, but I think it's had a big impact on him, and it certainly has had a big impact on me.
It's a truly remarkable thing for any child to be able to share that journey of being an artist and a creative industry professional with their loving parent. For most circumstances, young artists find themselves and are often paternalistic concern that they want to pursue a career in the creative industries because of the trials and tribulations that so often come with
Yeah.
it. The fact that you share this journey together and that you helped lead this journey for Curry, I think is a very beautiful thing. And I think it's something that aspiring young artists uh, will wish they had. You might
Yeah,
find an
I've been blown
unadopted
away.
appeal where thousands of young artists wish
Yeah,
you were their dad as well.
I know. I've been blown away by that response. But so many people reach out to me and say, "Oh, I wish you were my dad," and they're joking about that. But I know there is some of that where they feel like if they'd have just had that opportunity, things would be different for them. And I feel for them. But it wasn't just me. Curry had a lot of parents in his life. His mom was
Hmm.
also very supportive. All of his step parents, and everyone was just like, this is who this person is. And he's going to give the world something amazing if we just like don't get in the way. And we are there to support him however we can. So there was never any talk of like a practical career or, do something else to fall back on, but keep pursuing this. No, it was like, it's like no plan B, because if you have a plan B, that's going to be your plan A. It's just human nature to take the safest route. So he was always going to LA. And then as he was in high school and his younger brother started seeing that this was a reality, that this was really going to happen, then he became very interested in it as well. And was always around doing the videos with Curry. They had a YouTube channel way before that's a bad idea, just those two and the neighborhood kids.
That's wonderful. Yeah, because I understand Curry has a brother who is a cinematographer.
Mhm.
That's Riley, and an older brother who also works in production as well as part of crew and so forth.
Yeah, and that's Jeffrey. Yeah, it's really is a family affair, and Jeffrey wants to get into producing now. He's going to be shadowing a producer for a movie here coming up, and then with my short films, they were both involved. Riley was my DP for Good Tape, which we just finished shooting here in Alabama, and then I have a film, Medium Rare, they were shooting in Los Angeles in August, which he'll be the cinematographer for. And then Jeffrey will also be involved. It's just nice to have them around. I mean, I have a team of people that I trust beyond my kids, but it's so nice to have them because we have such a shorthand of how we can talk to each other. I know exactly what Riley and Jeffrey are thinking just by glancing over and seeing a look. And, yeah, and Curry and I have that shorthand too. That's why he likes to have me on set. He says because it's not like he's leaning on me much at all for anything except for those moments where he's maybe unsure about something and people are telling him different things. He knows he can just sort of look over at me and read my facial expression, and that's been really fun, and just makes me feel really important. So I appreciate that because I have the same with my other two boys when I'm working with them. So it really is. It's like it's such a joy and a treat to be able to all be in this thing that we all love and we're all passionate about, and be able to have the privilege of working together. It is a dream come true.
It is an irreplaceable bond that you have, which is such a powerful thing to have working in the industry. And to be honest, it's something that is at the core of even how we like to work with our own boutique studio. It's like a family, and you can love family. You can trust them. You can also accomplish things that might test ordinary professional
Yeah,
relationships when you
yeah.
need to go the extra mile. And so I applaud that.
Well, I was just going to say, it's the same way with Curry that I can tell him anything. I feel 100% free to tell him my full opinion about things because I know that I don't have that much pull. If I felt like what I said was going to have a lot of pull and push him in one way away from his vision, then I would be more reserved about how I share things and what I think. But he has no problem telling me, "No, Dad, you're wrong," or
Mm.
"You'll hear you, but that's not how I want to do it." And then we move on to the next thing. So I really, really love that how we've developed that.
I can absolutely see that because Curry's work with his short films, even Chair and The Reels, you do see an artist-led vision. It's something that comes from, I would imagine, his love of performance and characterization and things. It completes a sense of authorship that transcends a singular, let's say, mercenary discipline. It's all encompassing. And as collaborators, I would imagine work in a similar way. So that's how they create something so kind of unique. If I could ask you, when you're developing a new story yourself, whether that has been in prose or script, does the ideas come to you through images, characters, or is it a personal situation, theme? And how important is conflict as a central theme as well to bringing those elements together?
Man, well, all that, and all those are, we could talk for days about all those really. But when an idea comes to me, I'm always thinking of ideas, trying to think of ideas, and like any writer, I have a list of 100, small little nuggets, and but it's usually the ones that I can't stop thinking about, and like they just pull at me and pull at me, and that becomes the next thing. And I always start with character because that's you can plot anything. Like if I have 2 hours in complete silence, I can come up with any three-act structure plot, I feel like. So that I'm not worried about, but character is the thing that you have to be able to create a three-dimensional human, and put them in this world, and they have to be believable and in such a way that they're not just fulfilling plot, that they have some sort of core belief that has to be tested at every turn, and somewhere around down the road they're going to have to change their perspective about that core belief and have some sort of growth. They're going to have a want that is driving them. They're going to have a need that perhaps they don't know about. And when you put all that together is when you start to get these three-dimensional characters. And in an ensemble cast, I usually write very narrow POV. I like to take one character, and it's not, I don't always do that, but it's something that I like because I get to more embody myself in the character. But when you have three or four important people in a story, you have to do all that diligent work with each character, and then be honest about what they would actually do in the situation. And if that goes against what you had as an idea for plot, then it just does, because everything has to serve this character. That, to
Mhm.
me, that's what really moves a story and what makes us have an emotional connection to it.
I think that's something that comes even more naturally to those who arrive from a performance background. When they're thinking of character and they're inhabiting that character's emotional space, even before the writing is being put down, they're imagining the experiences or their reaction in character to a moment, something that just triggers something profound, and it compels them to go to the page, unable to vanquish some thought from their mind about that moment.
Yeah, I've learned so much about the art of acting. I think earlier, I kind of took it for granted. I thought, okay, you have these charismatic people who can embody different types of personalities, and it's a true talent. But I don't think I realized like the work that goes into it. They don't just read a script and show up. They really like spend a lot of time being this person, thinking about things that aren't even on the page, creating their own backstories. And I saw that a lot through the two movies that we've done, with Anything But Ghosts. Bryce Dallas Howard, who's a director herself, when she came, she brought so much to the character that Curry, I mean, he had a great character on the page. He and Cooper, they wrote that script, and but she just took it to a place that I don't think any of us really expected. And that's true talent. I mean, her whole life she's been doing this, so she knows what she's doing. And then also with Obsession, it's a cast of relatively unknown actors who are now huge names and are going to go on to be huge stars. But Indy Navarrete, she brought something to the character that neither Curry or I really expected or thought. If you read the script, I mean, the one that's leaked is pretty early and a lot has changed. But even with the final script, she was going to be more of the we went low hanging fruit and didn't really realize it. She was going to be like the desirable girl next door who everybody just is in love with, and because she's so cool and all that. But Indy brought this rock and roll edge to it that really showed how she could command the room and how she could turn someone like Bear into mush in a way that would make him uh, do morally atrocious things. You know, not that it's her fault. I'm not saying that she would do that, but it's like you could see how this could happen because she would command the room. She would, you know. Uh, she put Nikki in a position of you know, of dominance and power, which we Curry didn't have on the page. So yeah, I've recently learned how much an actor can bring and how important it is to cast the right people. I mean, it really will make or break your project.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Even for my own career, principally as a producer for independent film, it has really rested on the laurels of the contributions of writers and actors. And it's interesting. I mean, as a director, as I've sometimes done in a Roger Corman-esque way, if I give myself the job of director if I produce, you know, I have a vision, but you are really looking to these other artists to help realize that in a way that the go transcends what you thought could be possible,
Mhm.
and I think that's wonderful for Curry that he saw that potential that other artists brought, and it helped to elevate his vision to things that would have excited him even more, you know, and than what was possible. But I think all good filmmakers should do that. This is more of a personal conviction, but for those who are extremely rigid or arbitrary in auteur type principles and they want to micromanage every artist, there's always that risk of losing something magical or chaotic
Mhm.
that an artist's own imagination can bring.
Yeah, I think part of being a good director is just casting. I mean, you can't overlook that step. You can't just go for the prettiest face or the nicest voice. Like you have to really do that work and have a good casting director that helps bring the right people in front of you. You know, which Curry does. He does everything with Skylar Zern, who's amazing, and you know, I hope to use her for everything, but she probably won't be available much anymore after
Oh,
all these after this success of Obsession and hopefully anything but Ghost. I can't wait for people to see that movie. It's going to be so great.
with the dark wit of Curry and Cooper, that's going to be another celebration of that side of it, and yeah, I think that's going to be something really special as well. And it's good that that time will be taken to think how to present that to the audience as well, because it's that different story, different vision
Yeah.
as well, and it's good to get all those ducks in a
Yeah.
row as well. That's the producer in me talking, of course.
Right. Well, it's true. You know, when we were making anything but Ghost, you know, there were times where Curry was a little worried. He was like, this is so different than Obsession, and people are going to like Obsession, and then they're going to be disappointed because this isn't that. And, but over time, and now he doesn't feel that way. Now he's
That's
more excited about, I can show my range. I can show that I'm not just one note, you know, but because this is different. It's very scary, but it's also very funny. But it's not joke funny. It's just people doing funny things, which that happens in Obsession too. But it's Curry and Cooper, which they just have this chemistry, and it's just going to constantly be funny. It's kind of like if you took Ghostbusters and you dropped it in Hereditary. That's the sort of tone of the movie.
I mean, you will know anyway, Jeff, that the British humour and alternative humour and things tends to be quite dark and absurd. So
Right.
yeah, I think Curry holds a special place in British hearts, especially
Oh, cool.
for that.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
I'll tell you a quick story about
sure.
that. Curry grew up a huge Harry Potter fan. I mean, huge. His whole room was Harry Potter, and it's such a monumental part of his upbringing that we don't shy away from talking about it, even though it's controversial. Just because it meant so much to who he is, to erase that part of that of his life would be a mistake. So yeah, we he loved Harry Potter, and he always practiced his British accent. I mean, always. And he actually, believe it or not, has a really good one. And we would go every time we would go on vacation somewhere, and there would be people from all over the world. Like if we went to, Universal Studios or Disney World or whatever, for the whole day he would just speak in a British accent, and he would like walk up to other people with British accents and talk to them, and they would be like, "Oh yeah," So, and then I just recently he told me when he was in the UK promoting Obsession that even as adult, alone on the streets, he was still doing that.
That's wonderful. And, it's interesting because I would not have guessed that. And
Yeah.
funny enough, training in accents for our own, all the films we produce are anachronistic, and it requires accent work that trains our actors in 1930s, 1940s British received pronunciation. Um, so rather the old Vic. And so even when we're producing some like promotional materials, we do it in the form of almost like old newsreels and things. But the science of the accent, and you had, of course, the American transatlantic accent, as well, is such a science. And
Yeah.
Megan does workshops with like RADA and things like that with voice specialists. And so Curry, yes, if he ever wants to really nail that the 1940s British film accent, then I think I would love to hear him do that.
Yeah,
And
you would see straight through it probably, but for the novice, they would be like, "Oh, it's believable," because it's not. He's like I said, he's been doing it for decades. So he's developed probably a British accent that doesn't exist. It's probably just like a hodgepodge of regions and stuff. But yeah,
well,
it's pretty fun. It's a fun party trick anyway.
this is about character development, Jeff, and your approach towards that, especially when you're writing people who are, let's say, flawed, frightened, obsessive, and especially morally complicated.
Yeah, those are my favorite because that's real. All my years working in psychology, I was a psychiatric nurse practitioner for 9 years. Spent much of that time working at the psych hospital where people were sometimes in there and they didn't want to be, and they felt traumatized and victimized by the system that was trying to help them. It's a complex thing, and people that were experiencing pain and trauma at their highest, where they were having hallucinations and paranoia. The brain was trying to protect them from dealing with whatever horrible reality that they had just faced or they were currently facing. And it was such a gift to be able to spend time with people like that and learn to empathize and try to put myself in their shoes the best I could. And so that is carried over into my writing. And so it's important to me. It's interesting to me, and it's important to me to study the human condition. So I couldn't write just a one note, happy go lucky character. I've tried, but even then, they have many flaws and many things to work through and deal with. But it's real life. I mean, that's what we look for when we watch a movie. We want to learn something about ourselves. But yeah, I've even had Gravewater, which is probably my most celebrated screenplay, which I think hopefully will be a movie someday, whether I direct it or someone else. It deals with a woman who, in many ways, becomes the villain, much like Bear, kind of. But it comes from a different place. It comes from a place of being obsessed and being loving someone and not wanting to lose them. Um, and yeah, so that one's the one that pops into my head. But really, all of my scripts involve that sort of thing.
No, that's interesting when you talk especially about the human condition as well, because I feel as well that that is one of the most fundamental things for any artist, but especially a writer, to appreciate. But that requires experiencing it as well,
Mhm.
which makes it so much more challenging for many younger writers if they haven't as much of those experiences, because they have to insert themselves in often the mindsets of people who would ordinarily be older, to have experienced more things from uh, grief, loss, love, all those qualities. And I think there probably isn't enough as yet advice for aspiring writers as well, to go out there and experience those things, find those things, even if it was volunteering, at places like that, charities, clinics, and just to actually meet people, see these people who are going through transformative life experiences. For me, I've experienced that just in my personal life. But when I was young, it was, reading things in history was a big interest. And, you know, when you're exposed to these life changing, oftentimes tragic moments in people's lives and histories, it does make you evolve as an
Yeah.
artist if you come to terms with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I would say though that all writers, even teenage writers or people in college, they can pull from some experience that they've had. That they may not have gone through a divorce or had their mother die, or but they may have lost a pet. They may have had a best friend that moved. They can still understand pain and grief in different ways. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that we're experiencing now with Gen Z is that as a culture, they had this collective trauma that they all had to deal with where they missed school or whether that was high school or college. They were away from their friends. They had to go to school on their computers and try to manage their time, and they didn't have the executive function to do that yet. They had to take all of their social interactions and move them completely online and learn how to handle multiple personas depending on who they were talking to. All these things that is unique to their generation. Also, for the first time, being afraid of this unknown thing that was killing people that you couldn't see when you went outside. So those are things that they can pull from, and they are, and you're starting to see that with movies like Obsession, and not just Curry, but I think that this, people in the Gen Z generation are now just starting to get a platform, and so we'll start to see more and more of that. I'm excited for there to be more female voices from Gen Z because that's a whole other thing. Every generation has something that they've dealt with, and you always see that in art. The millennials went through 9/11 as young adults, and so that's usually some sort of a fear of dominant being, the unknown and being dominated by another force and safety being taken away for the first time. You start to see that in art. Yeah, I agree with you that as you get older, you have more to pull from, but there's always something that you can pull from as a writer.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, too often young people and their real experiences and feelings are dismissed or diminished, and so they're out there on social media creating their own art without
Yeah,
those
without anyone's
voices stopping
permission.
them. And what a surprise! People of older generations do resonate and relate to their
Yeah.
stories and experiences more than the content or films produced often by people their age or older. As we're seeing with this cultural, let's say, reformation taking place in cinema at the moment. I think we've kind of answered this one. I was going to add, though, perhaps if you feel there's another point to add, given your own background in psychiatry, has your understanding of human behavior changed the way that you write characters in conflict?
Yeah, yeah. I think mostly what I said before applies to that. But one thing to add to that would just be that my understanding of mental illness shows up a lot in my writing. For one thing, one of the things that movies get wrong a lot, and it kind of bothers me, is this multiple personality disorder, or what is really called is dissociative identity disorder, where how it's portrayed in the movies is not accurate. Most often, what happens is someone is dealing with some sort of trauma that is so powerful, so overwhelming that they choose to take on a different persona, a different identity, often leaving the place where they were. You know, the classic textbook example is a man who was married to his wife for 40 years. She dies, and then after the funeral, he gets on a bus and goes somewhere else and takes on a different. That's true dissociative identity disorder, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. But um, you know, I have a script that I write about a dissociative identity disorder, and what usually happens, the more accurate portrayal is that this person chooses as a defense mechanism to basically become another person, whether they realize it or not, and then they become so far detached from who they were that their brain, to protect them, starts to block that off so they can't easily go back to it. And so they kind of they don't forget, but they all everything previously is walled off, and they take on this new persona. So to me, being more accurate with what people actually deal with, as opposed to like the Hollywood boogeyman version of mental
Hmm.
illness, is way more interesting to me.
Yes, it's true. There is always a reductionist fetishism for these things to contend with, and yet there is eh, not just truth, but better ways of telling stories by expressing the kind of deeper realities to those conditions, because we can relate to them more than these more absurd, over the top renditions.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, you know, but you know, the culture. First of all, dissociative identity disorder is very rare, so most people's experience with it has been in cinema, and that has been so ingrained because it's such an easy device to sort of like pretend someone has puppets in their head, and they pull one forward, pull one back, push. You know, it's just it's an easy go to for trying to explain something.
Jeff, what do you feel separates a script that might seem well structured from one that feels genuinely meaningful or artistically credible?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about before. It's all about character. You know, you can have the most intricate plot in the world. You think about a thriller where you have someone who's trying to accomplish something, and there's a ticking clock, and constantly putting obstacles in their way. They get past this obstacle, then an unbelievable obstacle. You say there's no way to get out of this, and then you find a way to get out. Those stories are interesting, but only if we truly care about the character. And the only way we're going to care about the character is to relate to them in some way, and for them to be three dimensional and not just one note. And their sole existence isn't just trying to go through this obstacle course and get to the prize or save someone or whatever it is. And so you have to have, like I said before, a core belief that has to be tested at every turn, besides just the you know the action. And they have to be learning something a little bit as they go, so that at some point they have a choice. And most often they choose to see things a different way and evolve, but they don't have to. But they still have to face that choice, and they have to make a decision, and it has to be earned. And by doing that, you also are planting, you know, wants and needs for the character. And then, you know, what you brought up earlier briefly is each scene has to have some friction or conflict. I usually say friction because conflict sounds like fighting or arguing, or but any sort of friction, even if it's just a friendly scene where two people are you're setting something up and they're at a convenience store, they can't just have a super friendly chat. There has to be some sort of friction there, whether it's mechanically or through dialogue. So that's what makes the script interesting, is where you constantly, you don't feel like the scene that we're in is only there to get us to the next scene. And that's, you know, that becomes really boring and doesn't work. I mean, movies still get made that way, and those are the movies people walk away from and go like, "Okay, I saw it," you know, and then you forget about it 2 minutes later.
Yes, I mean, I can agree more with that assessment. But it's an interesting thing, though, that there are filmmakers, often writer directors, in my experience, that derive a comfort from excluding going in depth in their character and focusing on the plot, or let's say gimmicks and things. It's almost a way to remove themselves from the emotional stakes of their artwork by thinking there are a set of, let's say, more commercial or pop cultural rules that can allow them to achieve success without emotional vulnerability. But if your film doesn't have that and your characters don't have that, and if you're, as an artist, you're not willing to expose yourself apart to that, it's very hard to, as well, as you explained.
But those movies do get made. And
Yes, most usually they do.
yeah,
um, in today's
but you can
film,
always take a movie like that and actually make it better by digging into character a little more. In my opinion, anyway.
of course, I mean, as a script consultant, you could take a concept or a pitch for a project like that, and then observe that it's missing a heart and a soul, and then just
Mhm.
find a way to put one in it, and suddenly it's like charging it on the
Yeah,
mains. You
yeah,
know, it
yeah.
comes alive.
Then I'm a miracle worker.
In today's film landscape, how do you feel writers can best balance? And then you might disagree with this premise altogether, which is fine. But how do you feel writers can balance artistic ambition with the need for a clear commercial hook?
Well, you do have to balance it because, I mean, if you want to make a small art house film and you want to pay for it yourself, and you want to show it on DVD in the neighborhood, you can do whatever you want. But if commercial to me doesn't necessarily mean a brainless popcorn movie. It just means something that has appeal to more than one set of people, that you have a chance of, people actually spreading word of mouth. I mean, that's what's happened with Obsession. The word of mouth has just been insane, really, more than we could ever imagine. So, you have to, that's why I always say I write psychological horror that is commercial. Because if you just say you write psychological horror, people will be like, "Oh, those are those like creepy movies where you're trying to figure out what's going on." And then, okay, but I don't want to like put myself in that box because I also want to say, okay, but this had the potential to be commercially successful. So, but I don't really write popcorn movies either, where you just sit back and it's just like eating candy. It's just fed to you too easily. Like I want the viewer to have some of their own stakes, some of their own buy-in, where they're figuring things out along the way and connecting the dots. And that's one of the reasons too that Obsession was so successful, is that one of the passes that Curry did was addition by subtraction, where you go in and you just take away things um, that you can take away. Like if you can take something away, no matter how cool the scene was, if you take it away and the story doesn't change any, then most likely you should probably take that away. And when you do that, you end up with some holes in the story, not plot holes, but just holes. And that's where people can go in and play, and they can fill the dots and they can figure things out on their own. And that's where you see people coming up with all these wild theories and things about the movie, which has created all these conversations and buzz about it. So that worked way more than we even imagined. I think that's what you're talking about. Balancing that, being true to this sort of creative idea, but also something that would have mass appeal.
I think that's a fantastic example you give. And even in my own filmmaking, I could be guilty of putting too many bells and whistles or over explaining. I think that's something that younger artists right now in film seem to be more comfortable with, acting in this metaphorical, allegorical sort of
Mhm.
quality, where you'll see 30 somethings or even 40 somethings online. Agonizing over the precise logical details of a film,
Yeah,
whole
yeah. No, I'm
subreddits
dealing with
and
it now
essays about
because
how this could have happened or should
right.
have happened.
No, I'm dealing with it now because I have this recent example provided by my son of exactly how this can work, and it's beautiful because it's something he and I have talked about for years. And even now, when I'm talking about writing on a project with a producer and executive, they're giving me they're giving it to me like, and they're doing their job. They're supposed to be asking the tough questions, but it's constantly like, what's the lore? Well, how does this work? How do you explain it? Make sure that the audience understands. And I am constantly saying, I can explain it to you, but I don't necessarily think it needs to be in the screenplay because we need to give the audience room to figure things out and not spoon feed them everything. It's just it's not as enjoyable experience.
No, you're right. There's almost something there's something of mysticism about good horror filmmaking that allows the scope for mystery and imagination to fill some of the blanks. It terrifies many producers and distributors, but
Yeah. Well, and that, with Obsession, I can say this because it's in the public now. At one point there was a producer who was involved with Obsession who was willing to give Curry more than twice the budget that he had, which is still a small budget, but a significant increase if he would just uh, go after the more typical storyline, which is the low hanging fruit. And I could say this to you, and you'll be like, "Yeah, I've seen this movie 100 times." And that is where Bear realizes that he made a huge mistake and he goes down this rabbit hole trying to figure out what the one wish willow is, how it works, why it works. And then once he figures that out, then he has an arc to go and try to redeem himself by trying to undo all the things he did and fix it. Um, this is the low hanging fruit that a lot of filmmakers would have fallen for. And this would have been a lesser movie by a significant margin. It also would have really it would have taken away all the character work put into these characters because now you have Bear who has sets off all of these horrible things, and you're trying to have him redeem himself and fix a problem that he created and save the girl, the damsel that he put into this bad situation, and give him some sort of credit for it. Like that is just that's set up for so much failure. So Curry was never interested in that, and then thankfully he found, Capstone who was willing to let him do it the right way. So I think that's a great example.
I think that is fantastic. I almost sometimes wonder, um, and I speak for myself in this respect as well, if there's not something of the neurodivergent artistic principle, this refusal to compromise once
That's right.
fixated on a particular vision.
Yeah.
Double the money? No, no.
Yeah. Right.
I'll be
Yeah. Right.
forever
Because
triggered
Curry
by it. Yeah.
thankfully doesn't care about money, which is also a gift. And you're right. I mean, like it takes a lot of guts to say no to that and not have enough. It wasn't at the time like pick option A or B. It was like this is option A, take it or leave it, and then leave it. That's scary, because you want something so badly. You want to make this movie so badly, and but yeah, I think part of Curry's neurodivergence, his ADHD is a huge part of his success. Like it's a gift if it's harnessed. It's like a superpower if you can harness it properly.
Yes, I mean, I also have ADHD as well, and at times it has its drawbacks at times, but I wouldn't have the the boutique sustainable studio that we have if
Mhm.
it didn't come with the benefits of that, which are as you will already know. Um,
Yeah.
but I think when I saw the interview with you and your wonderful son, when he was holding the cushion, I was like, yeah, he's one of us. Yeah, he's.
Oh yeah.
I was like thinking, all my guys we're working with, because I think almost we seem to have a whole ADHD studio here. I think they all have cushions when they're talking, or they'll be fiddling with something.
Yeah. Well,
It's
I
just,
think a lot of artists that are ADHD, in this business in particular, because if not, you probably can easily get overpowered by this fear of safety and like, okay, this is my passion, but I need to pay the bills. I got to go
yeah,
get a real job, rather than being the delivery driver or being the waiter so that you can barely get by, but at the same time you have your time so you can get
yeah.
the momentum. That's scary. And people with ADHD get so singularly focused and obsessed about what they love that it doesn't bother them as much. So I think a lot of other people, unfortunately, just like become like, okay, well, I'm going to get a real job.
Well, sure. Because your son had a job which supported him just enough to get by, and then he devoted all his energy into creating wonderful works of art to build an audience and with
Yeah,
Cooper and to share. And I've always suggested that to the young folks in local colleges who get involved in our stuff, saying don't feel bad if you're doing something that you feel, if it's stacking shelves, serving coffee, whatever it is, whatever can feed you and put a roof over your head, then put everything into your craft and your art, and you are then an artist.
that's so true.
Regarding your thoughts about genre cinema, especially horror and thrillers, um, what do you feel about the freedom it affords writers and artists? And do you think it can, in fact, offer them more opportunities to explore serious ideas than many people would ordinarily assume regarding the horror genre?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I love it, and especially the modern horror. I've never really been a huge fan of like just straight slasher horror. I mean, it's fun, but again, unless you get me super invested in a character, then I'm not as interested. And that's the task before Curry now with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which he'll kill it. He'll be great. He'll make us care about these people, and it'll matter. And I think that modern horror, especially the way the mechanism of it is that it is basically drama, if it's done well, that whatever is going on internally, whatever pain, trauma that's going on, grief, is so overwhelming that it manifests outside of the body in some way, and in some external force, in some possible way. That's when it works best. And so horror, without what has looser rules and has looser guardrails and is less formulaic, it allows you a broader playground to explore all of these things. It's not the only way. I mean, you could really explore the human condition in a rom-com, but it's more difficult because a rom-com has to hit a certain tone. It has to hit a certain expectations that are going to take place. You already know exactly how it's going to end, because if it doesn't end that way, you can't really call it a rom com. I mean, it has to end with happily ever after, with a kiss, or whatever you're building toward that, and that in itself is entertaining. I love a good rom com, but to tell these true stories about the human condition, you need this playground where you can get down and dirty and not be afraid of where to go. And that's one of the things that is sort of Curry's fingerprint, or his signature, is that he doesn't pull any punches. He's not afraid of being mean. He's not afraid of, like, he really just wants you to feel something and see something.
I think that's a wonderful example, though, of a set of principles and values that Curry embodies, that as his father and then as an artist as well, you have helped shape, which is a wonderful thing because I happen to agree with those principles. I mean, for
Yeah, we're
myself,
right, right? We're right, we're right.
I,
Yeah, no, it's
I think
100%, and that's why I love writing psychological horror. It's just that you have so much freedom, and if it's done right, it can really mean something.
absolutely. I mean, one can look even at some of the greatest works of William Shakespeare, from Macbeth to Hamlet, and there's psychological horror, there's thrillers, um, and there's a special power they possess because they're able to take those themes exactly as you describe and run further with them with less constraints than might be associated by the strict drama conventions alone. Um, and yet, horror offers us the chance to effectively produce powerful dramas with these, um, well, for me as a romanticist, with these expressions that transcend oftentimes what is an ephemeral version of ordinary reality, you know, because that changes with the winds of performance style, aesthetics, and tastes. Right now, it's detachment is what one describes as naturalism, sitting in a diner window, hazing to a soft electronic score with 3 minutes of silence.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah.
If you go to the pub with me on a Friday, though, it's like It's like all the works of Shakespeare combined into 3 hours of drinking.
Yeah. Oh, I want to do that so bad. I want to go to Scotland and go to the pub with you. That
Oh
sounds,
yeah, it's an intense drama. There's no detached, whimsical kind
yeah.
of
Yeah. I bet you that would be an experience that would find its way into my writing. We
no.
figure out how to do that.
Looking back over your own personal journey through journalism, psychiatry, creative writing, and screenwriting, what do you feel each discipline has taught you about storytelling? And am I missing anything that has really informed your storytelling? You
Yeah. I was
know,
also an English teacher back in the day. Uh, Yeah, I mean, all those things have made me who I am, which is unique. Everyone's unique, so it's not like who I am is any better than anyone else. But for me, this has defined who I am. All those experiences, and even as a news anchor and a reporter, especially out in the field, that was my sort of gateway to talking to people in the middle of a trauma. And I think what made me interested in psychology, which led years later for me to get into that field. But showing up at house fires and showing up after homicides and like talking to family members who could barely keep it together but wanted to talk to me because they wanted their loved one's story to be told. Again, those were gifts. Those were moments that I cherish, not because of their pain, but just the honor of being, included and being seen as significant or important at that time in their lives and in their trauma. So and even being a news anchor and then learning, like sitting on the desk and learning how many people are involved over how many hours every day just to get me to this one moment of reading off this prompter, helps you learn teamwork and how things are put together and how people are passionate about things. And that certainly translates to filmmaking. So, yeah, I'm just appreciative to all of them. And again, it's just unique to me, but everybody has their ingredients of how they got to where they are today.
thank you, Jeff, for sharing with me your wisdom and insights into your creative processes. And for our audience, could you recommend a way for them to best keep up to date with your latest artworks and consultancies as well?
Yeah, jeff-barker.com is my website. And I usually like that's the best way because it has if you go there, you can get to everything else like the social media and the podcast. And so yeah, jeff-barker.com, certainly the best way.
Well, thank you so much for granting Amicus Horror and the British Horror Chronicle and myself with your time. And whilst I certainly don't need to wish it, I will still nevertheless wish you the best of success for yourself, Curry, Riley, and Jeffrey, as well as Cooper, of course, and all the other wonderful collaborators that you're working with to create such fantastic horror art. Thank you so
That's
much.
very kind. Thank you so much. Super cool being here.